Lifeguard, right? No more. That was many pounds ago, and a few years too. But the most memorable rescue I ever had, I worked this tower called Avenue 23. It's this tall tower on this jetty, rock jetty. And the reason I was there, and I only worked this tower one day a week on Sundays, from 8 to 4. And this tower is here for one reason. The lifeguard tower to the north and the lifeguard tower to the south of it couldn't see each other because of the bluff. So they put a tower there to have a visual bridge so that the lifeguards would have backup if there was ever a problem. So my job was to go to the beach, get paid in my bathing suit, and watch other people work. That's a good job if you can get it. So one day I'm up in this tower, comfortable, sitting back. It's warm, it's tinted windows. I've got the tunes on loud. I'm snacking on chips, watching life happen. There's one other job I have. There is a rock jetty out there, and you're not supposed to walk on the jetty. Some local surfers started walking out on the jetty to get close to the waves to decide if they wanted to go in or not. The waves were big. And I recognized them because I see them every day. I thought, they'll be fine. They never hurt themselves. So I decided to just let them go. And then the Holy Spirit said, they are paying you. You ought to do at least the one thing you're supposed to do. So I got convicted. I stood up. I got my jacket on. I put on my shades. I got my rescue can, those big red things that lifeguards always have, so that you've never seen Baywatch, I know. But they have those things. So I slid down the pole. I walked down the berm. I'm at the water's edge yelling at the kids. And then while they're pretending to not hear me, I did something that every lifeguard does instinctively all the time. I've been trained so much to do it that to this day I cannot go to the beach and not do this. In fact, my wife has seen me do it in my sleep. It's the prime directive for the lifeguard, the most important thing. So as I'm waiting on the kids to pretending not to hear me, I glance down and watch the water. I open my eyes and look. And we're trained to see riptides and currents and problems and poor swimmers and all kinds of traps. We know them all. So I glance down, I look back at the kids, and it registers in my mind what I just saw. Now down this stretch of beach is a steep berm with waves, big waves crashing right on the shore break we call it. And so I see a little toddler playing in the sand. A big wave comes, it crashes, the water surrounds him, grabs him, and pulls him out into the ocean. And immediately adrenaline shoots through me and I start running in slow motion like the TV show. More lives would be saved if we could run in real time. I rip off the jacket, I strap on the can, but when I get there, all I see is the ocean. When an adult is drowning, they do something we call climbing the ladder. There's no ladder, it's just wishful thinking. They wish there was a ladder, but at least it keeps their head up for a few seconds more. Children don't know, babies don't know about the ladder, they just drop. Finding a needle in a haystack is one thing, but try finding a needle in a haystack the size of the Pacific Ocean and it's constantly moving. So I just desperately say a word of prayer and I jump in and I'm trying to rescue this kid underwater, blind by Braille. And God answers my prayer. I feel flesh. It's a miracle. I plant my feet and I thrust him up in the air to breathe. And then I come up to breathe and I pull him up against the water, up the steep berm, and I put my ear on his back to see if he was breathing, if he aspirated any water, but by then the whole beach hurt his lungs. He was screaming like crazy. It was like a good thing. That kid is an adult today because of one thing. I got out of my tower and did what I was supposed to do. I didn't stay in my comfortable spot. I knew I was supposed to do my job. My job was not in the tower, but on the beach. And that got me close enough to save this kid's life. And that's what we have to do. We've got to get out of our comfortable towers. Get out there where we can save somebody who's drowning. Be close at hand. Be there for them. To do that, we're going to have to sit in the smoking section. All right? Now, I told you, God said to me, the days you're living in are important. You were selected by God to be born at the most significant time in human history, I believe. Do you believe it? Let me show you a few reasons why I think this. All right? This is from my upcoming book. It's all done. I'm working on the cover, and it comes out probably next month, On Rising Tides. The church must be a movement. I'm going to explain to you the why and then the how. All right? First, the first tide we're dealing with is the rising population. Let me just show you how significant your life is and when you were born. This is the population of the world from the time of Christ till our time. It was in the first century that Christ gave us the Great Commission, make disciples of all the nations. And at the time, the population of the world at that moment would have been comparable, probably less than the population of the U.S. alone today. Now that's a huge task. Imagine this. There's 11 of you. Now there's 12 because Matthias is added. And he says, you 12 make disciples of every living person on the planet. Ready, set, go. That's huge. Fortunately, he gave them a little help. He says, lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. That helps. Now, the kind of church model that we are accustomed to, the sing, say a prayer, hear a sermon model that happens on Sundays between the hours of 10 and noon, unless you're Adventist, that was developed with Constantine. And that model has been in play ever since. Now, prior to Constantine developing that model of religion, prior to that, we were very good at reaching all the nations. Once we formed that model, we stopped reaching all the nations. And that was back when the population of the world was a lot smaller. Now in 1804, something unusual happened. We passed 1 billion for the first time. So from the time Noah stepped off the ark, or if you believe this, some creature crawled out of the slime, from that time until 1804, it took thousands and thousands and thousands of years to pass 1 billion. And then I want you to see what happens next. It's unprecedented. Now watch this. You are here. This is where you're living right now. This is unlike any time in all of human history. Now there's momentum behind this growth. I want to show you how much momentum there is. I was born here. This is my lifespan, and I'm still alive, so I'm hoping it goes higher. Right? It took all those years to 1804 to pass 1 billion. Then within 100 years, it passed 3 billion. And in my life, we have passed 4 billion and counting. This is an exponential growth curve. This is what it looks like. This is what we're dealing with. The Great Commission given over here still stands. But the world has changed. And the way we do it over here didn't work then. It's not going to work now. No matter who you are, you have to realize we have to change if we're going to fulfill the Great Commission. That's what you're dealing with. Now, what could slow this down? You might say, well, wars or atomic bombs or plagues or financial ruin. Yeah, but you see, here's the thing. There's this 30-year period right here where you had World War I, the Russian Civil War, the Spanish flu epidemic, the Great Depression, 2 atomic bombs were dropped on cities, the Stalin's Great Purge in Russia, and World War II, and it didn't slow anything down. It didn't slow it. In fact, since 1970, there have been over 1 billion abortions. In other words, this would be a whole jump higher if it were not for abortion. This is the momentum we have to take into consideration as we think about making disciples. And so the way we make disciples has to catch up to this. And then that's not enough just to catch up. You have to keep up with this. And our current models are not doing that, right? I mean, let's face it. If what we're doing is going to multiply, it would have multiplied by now. It hasn't. So let's just surrender and say it's true. It's not going to multiply the way we've been doing it. How does Einstein define insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Our current systems are perfectly designed to see the results they are currently seeing. If we want a need to reach this kind of world, we have to think differently. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about. But it's not just the population growth that we have to deal with. There's also the rise in technology. Now, you're familiar with this because you're all on your smartphones even as I talk. Look at this. He's got a yellow pad. Do you remember those? Everybody look. Yeah, he's my age, so I understand. Man, technology has changed everything, hasn't it? And it's happening so fast. The problem is, we're like that toad in the water. The water's boiling, and we don't recognize how fast it's going up. I mean, just think, our language has changed completely. I mean, Webster has to redefine what it means to like a friend. I mean, you'd think liking friends, pretty simple, straightforward, but not anymore. I mean, you can text, you can tweet, you can retweet, you can do all kinds of things to people. They're verbs that didn't exist in the English language 5-6 years ago. And now you all know what it means. And you use that language. So, Alexa isn't speaking to me because she caught me in the buffering with Siri on my desktop in my iPad. I caught a virus, and now everything freezes up when I tweet. Now you hear that language, and my grandmother would slap me. She would think I was screwing around. That's how much the English language has changed. I remember in high school reading Shakespeare thinking, I know what every word is, but I have no idea what he just said. I'll look to like if looking like he move. What does that even mean? I know what each word is, but I don't know what they mean together. It took 400 years for us to evolve the language to the point where that needs some translation. But today, the language is changing like that in 5-6 years. That's how fast things are changing. Now, when your kids are growing up, you see them every day. You don't notice how much they're growing. And other than the little notches on the doorway of the kitchen, and the shoe bills, you wouldn't know how much they're growing because you see it every day. It's a slow progression for you. But if you didn't see them for a year or two, and then you saw them, you would know how fast this growth is happening. We are so in the midst of this, we have no idea how much technology is changing everything. This is a graph of the exponential growth curve, and it's old. This is out of date. There's no driving. Oh, yeah, there is a driverless car. It's still out of date, though. Big data is not even on there, and that's a big deal these days. You know, Alexander the Great figures out footwear and conquers the world overnight. The Romans built the roads, and they ruled the world for 1,000 years. Gutenberg builds a press, and civilizations change forever. That kind of dynamic technological change is now happening almost every year. This iPhone, I mean, isn't it amazing we still call it a phone? I mean, who actually uses it as a phone? It's so much more. And yet it's become now something every day I interact with. I don't even think about it. I just pull it out of my pocket and and just start I have the world at my fingertips, literally. Pastors, it used to be people would come to you for answers. You've been replaced. Siri has taken your place. Google is now answering all questions. So now, instead of being the answer man, I suggest you work hard at becoming the question man. Because people who ask good questions are the ones you're going to lead in the future, not the ones who have all the answers. There's also the rising economic gap. I'm going to sound a little bit like a Bernie Sanders campaign person here, because people don't like Bernie because he wants to redistribute the wealth. My suggestion is that the wealth is already being redistributed and doesn't take the government to do it. Let me show you a few things. The power is shifting to a few. Since the economic crisis of 2008 and 9, the number of billionaires on the planet has doubled. Whoops, we went too far. Hold on. We've doubled the amount of billionaires. So while everybody else is having a hard time making their mortgage, having a hard time paying their bills, the billionaires are doubling. They're multiplying. The 85 richest people in the world increased their wealth by $688 million a day. That's $500,000 a minute. That's $30 million an hour. That doesn't sink in. You really can't comprehend what it would be. I mean, that's like winning the lotto every hour. You can't comprehend what that's like, accumulating that much wealth. So let me help you with this for a second. Imagine I said you have 1 hour to spend $30 million. What would you do? What would you buy? I mean, what couldn't you buy if you had $30 million to spend in 1 hour? But here's the catch. After the hour, you get another $30 million. I mean, you can just basically buy anything you want. Everything you want. You buy a skyscraper, buy a sports team. Now what? Another $30 million that next hour. Bill Gates was the richest man in the planet, decided to give away his wealth, and increased by tens of billions of dollars. There are a few people that are gaining all this wealth. And it doesn't matter what politics you believe. This is happening when Bush is in office, when Obama's in office, and when Trump is in office. It's still happening. It's not about politics. And Bernie Sanders can't fix this. We can't vote this to stop. You just have to understand that the times you're living in, financially, a few are gaining power. And here's how it relates to us as churchgoers, all right? Right now, the way we do church is expensive. And the reason we can do it and pull it off in this day and age in the United States is we have tax benefits. But the people accumulating the power are not going to be on your side. You know, it's an anomaly, the freedom we have, if you look at all of human history. It's not going to last. You understand that, right? In fact, it should be an insult to us that we have this freedom. What does he say? Let me tell you why. All those who desire to live godly in Christ Jesus will be what? Persecuted. So the fact that we're not persecuted, what does that tell us? They hated me, he said, they'll hate you. The fact that they don't hate us might be a problem. So if we actually do things right, I suspect we will be in trouble with the law. And the government is notorious for putting economic sanctions on people they want to scold. Remove tax benefits. What would happen to our churches if no longer you got a tax write-off for a donation? Well, I think people would still give, just not as much. And it wouldn't all happen on December 28th. It just does happen that way. What would happen then if they demanded that you pay property taxes? Whoops, that would be harsh. Now I'm going to step on toes. What would happen if they said no parsonage allowance? It's coming. There are some states they've already ruled it unconstitutional. Now, churches are able to afford twice as many leaders because of the parsonage allowance. If they cut that off, we're going to be in trouble. Because the way we do church is so expensive. We're vulnerable. Jesus spoke about wealth differently than other sins and other things, other temptations. He didn't talk about lust this way. He didn't talk about murder or hate this way. When he talked about wealth, he gave it a personality, a will. He called it mammon. And mammon has a will of its own. It rewards those who worship it, and it punishes those who don't. And Jesus said, you cannot serve mammon and God. For either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will love the one and hate the other. You can't serve both. So the people who are accumulating all the power in this world are under the influence of an unrighteous, demonic spirit. I'm not saying every rich person knows. But Jesus did say, it's harder for a rich man to go to the kingdom of heaven than it is for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. It's possible with God. And there are always wealthy people who give their life to Christ. My friend Bob Buford just passed away. He oftentimes joked he wanted his last check to bounce. Supported our ministry for about 5 or 6 years. And we weren't even the kind of ministry he liked. He's just that kind of man. He's generous. Friends, there are wealthy people who come to Christ, but they usually die just as poor as the rest of us. I was reading a book by Anne Lamott, and she said, I can't exactly quote what she said, I'll paraphrase. You want to know how God feels about money, look at the people he gives it to. Friends, we're in a place where there are a few gaining power real quickly. This is multiplying. This is not just a slow incremental growth. This is an exponential curve. And they are not going to be friendly. We need to be prepared for that. And technology is such that those people with power know more about you than your spouse does. Probably than you do. They're monitoring every move of your finger. Every time you press a button on the remote. It used to be that in persecution, we'd be afraid that our neighbors or even family members would turn us in. Now, your Samsung smart TV will turn you in. Facebook will turn you in, right? You're already known, and they have your GPS location right now. You just you looked at a whole bunch of small little legalese script and said, I accept, and you didn't read a thing, and now somebody is collecting all your data. And last summer, the Senate voted in the Congress that companies have the right to sell your activity without your permission. That's the world we live in. We need to be prepared for what's coming. And we are on this exponential growth curve. We are not prepared. We're still fighting battles that were lost a long time ago and weren't the battles we should have been fighting. We have to change. Now, here's some good news. You want some good news? Good. Not everything is changing. God is immutable. Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So if you find your sense of purpose and identity in who Jesus is, you're okay in any time. Amen? That doesn't mean he's going to make sure your church lasts or your organization continues and is well-funded. None of that is promised. But what is that compared to Jesus? The most important thing you have will never change and never leave you. We just have to get to the point where we realize that is my true treasure and nothing else matters. Give me Christ and nothing else, and I'm good. we get to that point, nobody can touch you. You're untouchable. Secondly, the world is not only developing faster, but it's becoming flatter. What does that mean, flat? Are you one of those flat earth guys? No, that's not what I mean. I'm not. But I do believe that it used to be a very hierarchical world, and only those at the top could get their ideas published and out there and become important. And if you knew the right people and you had enough money, you could have a book published. You had to be highly educated. You have to have something to say, and it has to be something people want to hear, and you have to have the right connections. But today, because of technology, anyone can publish, everyone can publish. You don't need a publishing house to do it. You can do it yourself, and many are. You publish your thoughts on a daily basis, some of you on Twitter, on Facebook, in Instagram. You are publishing to the world, and you have an audience of followers. Some of us have more followers than others, or friends, depending on which app you're using. But the thing is, with all these people able to communicate, there's a lot of noise out there. So if you really want to be heard, then you have to have something good to say. Do you? Do you have something good to say? Yeah, I think so. I think, personally, these young people I'm with, and many like them, they're being called out for a time that is coming. And their message and their life will be attractive to their peers. And it will not be church as usual. It will be unusual. It will be persecution-proof, a future-proof faith. But it's going to look different. Because of social media, we are also shrinking the world. Even though the population is growing, it used to be that any two people on the planet were connected by 5 or fewer relationship jumps. In the 2000s, I used to tell a joke this way. I used to say, I know a guy who knows a friend who went to school with a lady that has a cousin that was an aunt that knows where Osama bin Laden is. Can't use that joke anymore. But the idea is 6 degrees of separation. Guess what? It is no longer that. The scientists tell us it's now 4 degrees of separation because of so much social media. In other words, I am connected to any human being on this planet with only 3 jumps. I can reach anyone if I just share with the right person. It makes it more, the Great Commission has become easier, not harder, through communication. More good news. This is massive moving of entire populations of nations. And they're not just leaving their land, they're leaving the God of their people. And I have friends that are working with refugees in Europe, and they are seeing tons of people come to Christ. They're saying, we're not just leaving Syria, we're leaving Islam. Show us a better way. Now think about this. These are people who are apostolic before they're saved. They're already moving. They come to Christ, it's not hard to get them to move again. And suddenly now they're missionaries, entire nations, bringing the gospel. And this is happening. This is God working for today. And finally, there's 2 more finallys. The power of multiplication can work for us as well, but we must do things differently. Like I said before, what we're doing is not multiplying. Doing more of it won't multiply. We have to do it differently. I'm going to share with you some ways to do that as we move on. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. He spoke them into existence. He created the earth. He separated the land from the sea. He pulled together dust, formed a man out of the dust, and breathed life into him. And the human beings were born. Sentient, able to think, made in the image of God himself, able to fellowship and communicate and create and imagine things that aren't, and have a will that chooses right or wrong. This is an amazing moment. And in that historical moment, when he first created mankind and could carry on a conversation, the first words out of his mouth were, be fruitful and multiply. Seems to me like this is an important thing on God's agenda. The first words God ever spoke to mankind, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Don't stay in the garden, fill the earth. Jesus' last words are also about multiplication. He says, all authority of heaven and earth is with me. Go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey all that I command you. And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. Now, where's the multiplication in this verse? We are commanded by him to make disciples by teaching them to obey his commands, which are to make disciples. See, you cannot fulfill the Great Commission without multiplying disciples. Because it's a command of Jesus, and the way you make disciples is to teach them to obey commands that Jesus gives. And it's multiplication. God's first word, Jesus' last words are multiply. And he gives us the power to do it. He says, all authority of heaven and earth is with me, and I'm with you. You ever connected those dots? I mean, really connected them? How much is all authority of heaven and earth? That means there is no other authority in heaven or earth. And he says, I'm with you. We all ought to walk a little taller. There ought to be a strut when we walk around. Because all authority of heaven and earth is going with me. And this is true for every follower of Christ. Brand new Christians have this. And we're afraid to let them loose. All authority of heaven and earth is on your team. We should be a little bit more, fruitful? We're just not tapping. It's like having Michael Jordan on your team and sitting him on the bench. It's like having LeBron James on your team and not passing him the ball. Friends, Jesus is all you need. Let's put more confidence in him and less confidence in ourselves. Let's stop trying to win the game for Jesus, and let's let Jesus win the game, because that's what it's really all about. Now I'm going to give you a basic lesson in math. You didn't think that was coming, did you? You wouldn't have come if you did. There are 4 different processes in math and arithmetic. There is what we're used to. What we're talking about is multiplication, right? 2 becomes 4, becomes 8, becomes 16. There's also addition. Both of these end up in the black. They're both good. There's also subtraction. Now, we want multiplication. The way we do ministry can only produce addition. But we're very good at subtracting from other churches. But by far, our greatest gift to the world is division. We're good at the division part. All right? But what we need to do is get good at the one thing we are not good at, multiply. It's the only way we can catch up and keep up and be relevant in this world with the Great Commission. So I just gave you a lesson. Now I'm going to give you a test. So get out your number 2 pencils. What would you do if 100 people came to Christ in a day? Would it be a good day? Woo! We'd remember this day for a while, wouldn't we? That'd be a good day. And we'd know what to do with them. They'd come. They'd be part of our church. We'd welcome them. We'd find people to meet with them and make them a part of the family. That's no problem. What are you going to do if 1,000 people come to Christ in a week? I mean, that's almost Book of Acts type stuff. Whew. But as a pastor, you're going to be stretched a little thin with 1,000 people coming to Christ in a week, right? I mean, it's doable. We can have multiple services, maybe even some multiple sites. Hire a few. Now, here, let me help you. This is a what-if scenario, so it's imaginary. So if we're going to imagine, we might as well really imagine. All 1,000 are tithers. So this is not an economic issue. They're all coming. What are we going to do with them? Well, we can build another building, a bigger building, buy some more property, hire some more staff. What are you going to do if 10,000 come to Christ in a month? Yikes! We're gonna have to rent the stadium for the university to fit them all in there. Sundays might be a problem. I think they have games sometimes on Sundays, but we could figure it out. We need to hire a lot more staff. They're all tithers, so we could do that. But we're stretched really thin now. You know why? Because our methods are all geared towards addition. And this kind of growth is multiplicative growth. We're not prepared for it. We're not equipped for it. Our systems can't handle it. What are you going to do if 1 million come to Christ in a year? There is no stadium. You can't hire enough staff members. See, if we actually saw exponential growth, we wouldn't be able to take care of it. We wouldn't know what to do with it because we are so programmed for an addition, incremental style of ministry. We can't handle exponential growth. We need to learn to handle exponential growth. That's why I'm here. Now, here is what a disciple-making movement looks like that's multiplying by a factor of 2 every year. All right? Now, there's something really obvious about this. What do you first notice when you look at this chart? Yeah, it starts slow and it starts small. Allen and many sociologists call this the long tail. I think of it more as a long runway before we take off. Now, big jumbo jetliners, without a long runway, you're not going anywhere. You have to have a mindset that accepts the long runway. It needs to be slow and small in the beginning. There's no other way to multiply. And this is why we're not multiplying. Because we get impatient. So we start doing things that add. Addition cannot take the place of multiplication. It can't keep up. It goes faster in the beginning, but it doesn't go as fast in the end. So we have to learn to multiply. You cannot get multiplicative results with an addition strategy. So here are the actual numbers. In the first year, you have 2 disciples. Big deal, right? Second year, you have 4. You know the numbers. Then you have 8 and then 16. It takes you, 4 years before you have a small group. After 4 years of being supported by the convention, you have 16 people. They're not going to write up a story about you in the denominational newsletter. They're not going to invite you to speak at Exponential Conference. They won't even invite you to Exponential Conference. Nobody will pay your way. You feel like an abject failure. 4 years and we got 16 people. It takes you 7 years before you have what we think of as a legitimate church. You've passed the 100 barrier. You haven't even passed the 200 barrier yet. You don't feel like a success. And yet, in 15 years, 32,000 people have come to Christ. Now, they're not all going to your church. This is decentralized. This is spreading as it goes. That's the way the kingdom is. But 32,000, you might get invited to speak at Exponential. You might be written up in the denominational newsletter, or worse yet, they'll promote you out of your effectiveness. In 20 years, you'll pass 1 million. But it doesn't stop. The next year, it's 2 million. It took you 20 years to get to 1 million. How much does it take to get to 2? 1 year. See, that's multiplication, folks. It's different than addition. And it requires that we do things differently. By the 34th year, you have reached every soul on this planet, and you are reaching out to other solar systems. We're done. 34 years. How many of you are older than 34? You could have done this by now. We could all go home if you were busy. Of course, we'd all be busy then. This is how multiplication works. So it requires that you're patient in the beginning, that you don't try to make it go fast in the beginning. And yet, all of our church planning methods are get as many people as fast as you can. And that means you're quickly running to an addition strategy. This has to change in our minds, or it will never happen in our works. Now let's take that, flip it upside down, put it on a hill so you understand how this momentum works. And I want to do this to teach you something. I have told you this. Every follower of Christ has everything they need to live godly in Christ Jesus. All authority of heaven and earth is with the 13-year-old African-American girl who is without parents, living in the inner city. She comes to Christ. She has everything. The greatest spiritual heroes don't have more Holy Spirit than she does. And I believe in every one of us who have Christ is the power of a movement. We just need to let it out. But if that's true, and every one of us has the power of a movement, why are we not seeing more movements? Good question. This is the answer. The reason is movements are vulnerable at the beginning. Now here's my car at the top of the hill. My car's out of gas. My car's always out of gas because I got to go adult children who drive my car. They'll drive their car till it's out of gas, then they'll drive Dad's car till it's out of gas, and then I'll buy gas for both of them. That's just the way it works. But it's okay. I don't need gas. I don't need petrol because I'm going to the bottom of the hill. I just need gravity and tires. But there's a senior pastor at the front of the car, denominational executive, somebody who's holding the car there, standing in front of it. Now, it doesn't take a lot to stop the car at the beginning, does it? Just lean into it a little bit, and you will hold this 6-ton car stationary at the top of the hill. Just keep your hand on the hood. You can put your foot in front of the tire, and it will stay there, and it won't smudge your shoe. You know why? There is zero energy behind the car. There's nothing pushing the car. The gravity can be stopped with one finger because there's no energy, no momentum. And that's why we're not seeing movements, because before they can start, we stop them. The way we do churchianity stops movements from the very first day. And that's what I've been addressing already today. We need to just get out of the way, and the car will roll all by itself. Now, what would happen if the denomination executive, senior pastor, tried to stop the car here? What would happen? The car would go bump. There'd be a grease spot on the hill, and the car won't slow. In fact, with every inch, it goes faster. That's how momentum works. Now, that can work for us, not just against us, but right now, that's working against us. So let me put it to you this way. Every year we continue to do what we're doing, that car gets faster and faster ahead of us. The world population, the technology, the economic gap, it's spreading exponentially. So the longer you wait, the worse off you are. That's why I'm getting so impassioned about these things. We've waited too long already. But this can also work for us. So if only one of you hears this message and says, that's it, I'm going to make disciples and that's all I'm going to do. And that one person decides, but all I'm going to do is make one disciple. At least this year, just one. Because that's twice as many as I made last year. So you go out of this room and you find one lost person and you spend 1 year giving them Jesus. In such a way that at the end of the year, both of you can make another disciple. And then that next year, the 4 of you make another disciple. Then what you're looking at is this. In 34 years, you've reached the whole world. That's all it would take. And the whole time, what are you doing? You're making one disciple a year. That's it. How many of you think you can do that? What would happen if that's all we did? What would happen if we all did that? It wouldn't take 34 years. We would do it much faster. But we just have to get back to what Jesus said. He never told us to plant a church. In fact, he said, I will build my church. Thank you very much. He said, you make disciples. Don't make disciples of yourself. We don't need more of you. We have too many of you already. Make disciples of Jesus. Who can make disciples of Jesus? Who can make disciples of Jesus? That's it. We just did that. We could catch up and keep